40-50% of people's time, even engineers' time, is spent in like repetitive tasks that you have to do to keep the machine running. At Google, we used to call it KTLO, keep the lights on task. And sometimes the KTLO is like 40% or 50% of a team's bandwidth, right? You have all these creative, highly talented folks. They're not innovating anymore. They're just keeping the lights on. Can we actually make any company more productive? Can we remove a lot of this mundane, tedious tasks? These are soul-crushing part of your job. You have to do it. Nobody enjoys doing it. Can we remove that, which will create more empowerment for employees to do more creative stuff? Will actually make every business, small to large, more effective, more kind of productive. If we can do it at scale, it will be transforming the entire society. Companies build technology but cannot take it to market fast enough, which I would argue was the case with Google and AI. Remains to be seen, but this is an opportunity for every startup right now to disrupt every large company because this is a phase change in technology.
Welcome to Autopilot, a podcast where we discuss the past, present, and future of AI and automation.
From Atlanta, Fulton County. Passions.
That's one small step for man.
We explore how AI is creating and disrupting large industries in conversations with top founders, investors, and historians. I'm your host, Will Summerlin. Let's dive in. Welcome to Autopilot, a podcast where we discuss the past, present, and future of AI and automation.
From Atlanta, Fulton County. Passions.
That's one small step for man.
We explore how AI is creating and disrupting large industries in conversations with top founders, investors, and historians. I'm your host, Will Summerlin. Let's dive in. All right. Thank you for joining us on the Autopilot podcast. So today we're going to talk about AI in the enterprise, AI agents, lots of interesting stuff around the new company that you're building. But before we jump into that, we have to start with your background. You have an incredible background. You're one of the top product executives in Silicon Valley. So maybe we can start there. Just talk about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you for the opportunity and great to meet you again, Will. My background, I'll try to keep it brief. Computer science undergrad from one of the IITs in India. I was actually an engineer first few years in my career. And that was very instrumental. I wrote a lot of code in kind of shaping my thinking as a product manager as well. Went and got a business degree from Sloan School at MIT. Joined Google kind of at the lowest rung of the product management ladder. And I was very lucky to work on something that was interesting and new at that time. This was like 2007. Mobile was just coming out. And I became the first PM to work on mobile ads and actually co-founded that with another engineer. Mobile became very, very large. And I ran that for the next 10 years. I was globally leading mobile search ads, and it went from zero to almost $50 billion of revenue during that time. I got promoted many times as well. I was VP of product. I moved to Flipkart for a couple of years. I was chief product officer there. Flipkart is India's largest e-commerce portal. Flipkart got bought over by Walmart. I came back to Google to run Google's product search, product ads business, and grew that to $25 billion in revenue per year. Many, many new products, new innovations. And then last 3 years before starting Ema, I was chief product officer at Coinbase, where we diversified the product portfolio, grew revenue by 10x, hired most of the tech talent and the product talent there. That's my quick history.
Curious, before we jump into AI and Ema, well, I guess this is somewhat AI related, but Google's, I think, sort of in this interesting place with AI where to some degree in the core search product, it's like an innovator's dilemma. Their core business is probably one of the best businesses in the history of capitalism. And now it seems like it's either threatened or potentially enriched by AI. And you have lots of companies like Perplexity who are biting at the heels of Google. Curious, like, how do you think Google's position going into the next decade when it comes to search?
Look, I think Google has incredible assets, like the talent pool, the AI research that happened in Google over the last decade or more. The Transformer paper, original paper on the authors from Google, many of whom I personally know and or worked with. I think the challenge for every company is how do they reinvent themselves. There may be sometimes a little bit of too much kind of complacency that can come in. I think Google can turn it around if it wishes to very quickly with all the assets Google has. But I don't know if they can move as fast as a company. And Perplexity and many of the other companies are moving really fast. A lot of them have roots from Google. They have ex-Googlers there. Yeah, it remains to be seen. But I think to the broader point you're making, I think generative AI is a transition point in the industry, just like what happened with, say, mobile or before that, internet, right? The kind of the order shifts around. The top companies kind of change a little bit based on who moved faster on the new technology and who could actually apply that technology for real business. Since sometimes companies build technology but cannot take it to market fast enough, which I would argue was the case with Google and AI, because people wrote that the Transformer paper, but the product came a little bit late. It remains to be seen, but this is an opportunity for every startup right now to disrupt every large company, because this is a phase change in technology.
Absolutely. And maybe we can jump into what you're building now. Let's start with your thesis for Emma. And you're in an interesting position because your opportunity cost is so high. Like if you're 20 years old and you're starting a company, like your opportunity cost is pretty low, but like, you could go and lead many of the great technology companies in Silicon Valley. And instead you've decided to start a company. I'm curious why you did that and what the thesis is for Emma.
Look, I've run very large teams, small and large teams, grew teams in iconic companies like Google, Coinbase, right, which hires really good talent. But what I've seen is even with all that talent, all that automation, very large portion, 40, 50% of people's time, even engineers' time, is spent in like repetitive tasks that you have to do to keep the machine running. At Google, we used to call it KTLO, keep the lights on task. And sometimes the KTLO is like 40% or 50% of a team's bandwidth, right? So then the team, you have all these creative, highly talented folks. They're not innovating anymore. They're just keeping the lights on. So one thing that bothered me, and we, as part of Coinbase and Flipkart as well, we went through some rough times. Sometimes we, overhired, or the business hit some difficult situation. So we had to very unfortunately let go of significant portion of our staff at that time. When that happens, it's not like the work just reduces by 20% or 10%, right? The work remains the same. So my engineering counterparts and me always was like looking deeper into how do we get more productivity? How do we remove this KTLO portion in every business, or particularly in our specific business at that time? So that problem, I thought, with all the advancement in AI, this is the right time to attack that problem. Can we actually make any company more productive? Can we remove a lot of this mundane, tedious tasks that employees, these are like soul crushing kind of part of your job. You have to do it. Nobody enjoys doing it. Can we remove that, which will create actually more empowerment for employees to do more creative stuff? Will actually make every business, small to large, more effective, more kind of productive, and will be, if we can do it at scale, will be transforming the entire society. And I think we are at that point where this is like the next industrial revolution. We can get a massive boost in productivity across the board in everything we do with the help of that. Seemed very exciting problem to tackle, getting out of Coinbase, and kind of I took some time off, and that kind of really filled my brain. Okay, how do I solve this problem? I read every research paper I could get my hands on, talked to a lot of the researchers, a lot of the authors of those papers, started tinkering, and felt like, yeah, we could build something here, and got together with some ex-Googlers, and we started working on it. That was the beginning. And it's been a great journey so far, but I think we really have this opportunity to transform work in the future, also transform how enterprise software is written in the future.
And when you went to the whiteboard with the idea, how did you think about horizontal versus vertical? And, we're seeing a lot of companies pop up, startups in particular, that are focused on highly verticalized applications of AI, right? AI for recruiting specifically, or, AI for software engineering. And then you have others who are taking a much more horizontal approach, and you could maybe put some of the foundation models in that bucket. Curious how you thought about that horizontal versus vertical trade-off.
Yeah, great question. From the very beginning, our idea, our vision was to build a horizontal platform, build a factory of AI employees. So we called Ema our product, and our company, it's the acronym for Enterprise Mission Assistant, EMA, but it came together as a nice name as well. But we thought of Ema as a universal AI employee, and we could build, kind of morph Ema into any specific role, or instruct Ema, or create a new kind of variant of Ema very quickly to mimic human role in any department, right? So that was the thinking from the very beginning, and we have stuck to that. We have built a horizontal platform. By the way, this was a slightly contrarian approach, to be honest, because a lot of people told me that's kind of more difficult to do and kind of stupid also. Some people told me just focus on one thing. One thing that I always hold very high in my decision making is when some very intelligent people that I respect tell me that your idea is stupid, I think there is something in that idea. I get very excited.
Absolutely.
And so, of course, if 100% people say it's stupid, maybe there is something you got to look back. But if some very smart people that you respect say it's a stupid idea, I think, okay, or they get almost provoked by the idea, I think there is something good in that idea.
I mean, that's true of like the most valuable companies on earth now, right? Like SpaceX was a stupid idea. Google was a stupid idea. You didn't need another search engine. And it turns out consensus is often wrong. And when they're wrong and you're right, there's a ton of upside potential.
It remains to be seen, just to be very clear, with all humility, this is our conviction, right? And it remains to be seen. What we have seen, though, is building horizontally has given us a lot of benefits, because what we have found is there are some patterns in how these workflows in enterprise come together, right? And we have built an agentic framework. In fact, back then we started building an agentic framework, but the word agentic AI was not popular. So it was very hard for us to explain almost, oh, we are building these AI employees. It's like agentic AI. We're not building large new foundational models, because some of our competitors took that route. They're like, okay, we'll teach LLMs how to take actions, because that was a big problem, right? LLMs can generate words. Can it take actions? Can it do plan? Can it kind of follow through a complete workflow? Can it adapt, right, based on what's happening in a workflow? And we thought we'll take an agentic approach to that problem when the agentic word was not coined yet. And that's what we have done. So we have basically figured out, okay, there are kind of general patterns on all of these problems, and we can pull together, bring together these agents to solve almost any type of new workflow that we are encountering in the enterprise today. And it's been great to see that initial hypothesis actually playing out for the business we are building today.
And I'm curious, are you seeing any use cases with the most pull Like, are you seeing a ton of pull in recruiting or compliance, or is it pretty equally weighted across different use cases?
Yeah, so we have seen early pull in a couple of areas. One is customer experience. So the entire kind of customer support agent, maybe a chatbot, maybe helping your customer service agents to be more effective, like coaching humans. So AI is now coaching humans, enriching knowledge base. So we are seeing lots of kind of pull from there. Customer support traditionally has always adopted new technology a little bit faster. So that's not a big surprise. The other area is sales, which is similar. Like we are seeing a lot of pull in automating sales lead generation, writing business proposals, creating content, sales and marketing, creating content, sales intelligence. So those are the two areas where we see a lot of pull. But also employee experience, right? How can I make employee experience richer, better, kind of create more self-help? And then almost 50% of our customers use us for what we call like specialized kind of roles. So while customer support and sales are kind of standard roles, specialized roles will mean things like, in healthcare, like prior authorization of medical procedures or drugs, right? We have legal departments using us for automating contract reviews or automating, some companies, they get a lot of lawsuits in their hand, figuring out which lawsuits to respond to how. Procurement, all across the board, wherever there's just a lot of tedious, repetitive work, a lot of humans employed today to do that work. And they can't handle it because many of these customers they have so much flood of this work, they can't hire fast enough to even do this work.
One of the points of pushback that I think we're seeing, kind of one of the bear cases in AI is, hundreds of billions of dollars have been spent building out the compute infrastructure, and the productivity boosts haven't come through yet. The profit hasn't come through yet. And I think, naturally we're sort of in the build out phase, and I have conviction that it will come. I'm curious, on the ground, if you zoom in, have you been able to measure the productivity boosts that your customers are seeing from this technology in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. See, that was kind of my original thesis in starting this company. I felt, look, the LLMs or the foundational models are going to be the new operating systems almost for of enterprises, right, in the future. But operating systems themselves don't generate value. It's the last mile that generate value. They enable building applications, right? If you look back 30, 40 years, you had databases and operating systems. Databases don't really do anything unless you use it in some interesting way, right? You build an application layer on top of it. So the last mile is really critical, right? How do you deliver value? How do you quantify value? How do you understand the source of value? We started this company working with a bunch of customers upfront, right? Looking at those use cases and working backwards from that, saying, okay, what kind of agentic architecture we need to create? What kind of patterns that are emerging? And that's been our motto from day one. So every product, every persona, I call this AI employees personas, Ema's personas, we automatically embed metrics on the value we are generating, right? How many tasks we completed. And in fact, our pricing model is also based on the value we are generating. Our pricing model is not based on traditional SaaS model, which is number of seats, right? Because I think there will be a transformation on that front as well. It's based on outcome, number of tasks we actually help the customer with, right? So it's very clear.
How do you measure that from the pricing perspective? Like, is it just like per task complete, or like some form of the amount of content generated?
It's task complete and how many tasks completed at the level of satisfaction that customer desire. So, we basically sell a bucket of tasks, 100,000 tasks, right, of this nature, this type, right, and has a price or something. And then we sell overages, like, every 10,000 or 5,000, whatever, depends on the task. And some tasks are much more complex than others. For example, generating a business proposal or answering an RFP, very complex task, 150, 200-page long document. We're able to do those things. Of course, that is much more complex than answering a quick question from an employee. Hey, how many vacation days do I have left? Right? So it depends on the nature of the task, complexity of the task, like high, medium, low, different types of complexity. The other big issue here is how do you know the task is complete? Because there's a lot of ambiguity in some of these tasks. Right? How do you know is this ticket answered properly or not? It's not just multiplying numbers. It's not a numeric answer that you can say, oh, this is perfectly accurate. Sometimes we are generating content. Sometimes we are generating a complex workflow and following through that whole workflow. Our agents are following through. So we often rely on human feedback to understand. That's why the analogy of Emma as a AI employee, basically it's an employee. You hire a new employee, you have to do performance evaluation. And I think this will be a growing field of research going forward, how to do performance evaluation and do it in more and more automated fashion of your now AI employees, not just human employees.
Yeah, and it's the pricing model is brilliant because like we've done a bunch of work to try to dimension this, and the global enterprise software market's about $1 trillion a year. So companies spend $1 trillion a year on software, but the same cohort of companies pay human employees $32 trillion a year to do knowledge work. Like the pool is so much bigger on the human labor side. I'm curious, as you think about the labor dynamics and how this is going to play out, do you think AI will end up replacing employees in the sense that, like, if you have a team of 100 now, you'll fire 90 people and you'll have a team of 10 with AI agents? Or do you think it's just going to make companies more productive and the labor force will roughly stay the same size?
I think what will happen is every employee needs to learn how to work with AI, just like every employee had to learn how to work with computers, when computers came in. Yes, there are many roles. Like if, for example, if you just look at before computers, people are writing on paper, right? So there may be some people just copying things from one paper to another paper. That role doesn't need to exist because computers can make infinite copies very quickly. But then there are more jobs created because of computers, right? There are more interesting and more value-added roles in the enterprise. I think same thing will happen. So very important is everybody will need to learn how to work with AI. Look, you had to learn how to work with computers. Early days, it was harder to learn because it was very fixed UI, very fixed instructions, or the programming language is, you need to learn the semantic, the grammar of the language well. You need to learn logic. It's getting easier. You can interact with computers now with natural language, right? But still, you need to learn how to manage this new AI entities, AI employees. That skill will be valuable. And I think there will be more jobs created because more companies will become more productive. What will they do with all the kind of additional profit? They're going to put it back in to and expand into new areas where humans will be needed to think about those ideas in new areas. I think we are at that point in history. I really believe if you think about pre-industrial revolution era, 90% of humanity worked in farms, right? Farming, or something related to farming, maybe more than 90%. We would think, okay, with all these machines, what will all these people do? The fact is, all the machines created a lot more opportunities for humans to do more interesting things that nobody could imagine could even exist. Oh, you can build an airplane now, you can build a car, you can build a computer, right? All started 200 years back, right? Just imagine how much of a leap we have made as civilization in just last couple of 100 years compared to the 10,000 years before that, right? Which is because of the technological innovation. I think we are at that moment right now, next 10, 20 years. We're going to see this explosion of new opportunities, new technology, because a lot of the mundane work is going to get automated. I think human brain is incredibly powerful and capable, right? Yeah, we can, if you give us the mundane work, like, okay, just copy paste this for a whole day, we can do that. But if you free us up, we can innovate, we can build a rocket ship to the moon.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny too. There's another parallel. Like if you look at the shift to agrarian society and the invention of the plow, pre kind of agrarian society, like humans spent all of their time hunting and gathering for food, and one human could produce enough food for one human essentially. And then you had societies that shifted to this agrarian culture and created plows and all of that. And all of a sudden now one person could produce enough food for 5 people. And so the other four didn't just like do nothing. They went and became blacksmiths and created armies, and the societies who embraced that agrarian culture ended up dominating the societies that didn't, because they had militaries and blacksmiths and everyone else. And it seems like I completely agree with you. We're entering the same era, and it might actually be bigger than the Industrial Revolution, because you can get a lot more leverage over knowledge and intellectual work than you can over physical work. So it's going to be a weird decade.
Absolutely. I can tell you from just my own experience, like setting up this company, we have this motto, we're an AI first company. So we'll try to automate as much as possible, just our own company kind of operations. And I can see that there's so much more we can do now with technology that was not possible. One person can be so much more capable. Even writing like software, there are tools that are coming up to writing content, generating content, and so on. I think the future companies will see, single person, multi-$100 million companies, or, tens of people building like multi-billion-dollar companies. Imagine that power. And as there'll be a lot more startups in the future, a lot more startups with small number of people, but very substantial amount of value created for the society.
Completely agree. And one last question before we go. You've had an incredible set of experiences through your career. I'm sure you've learned a lot in the process. If you could go back to yourself on day one, starting your first job, what advice would you give yourself given everything you've learned?
Yeah, I think the number one advice is don't be afraid to fail. I think I was probably too afraid to fail, and don't put so much pressure on yourself to succeed, which is like, oh, I have to do this. Like I have to make everything I do successful, because you only have control over a certain number of things. You don't have control over the whole universe. That's a very humbling thing to understand, right? You do whatever in your capacity, but in spite of doing everything, it may fail, and it's not a bad thing. You learn a bunch of things and move on and do the next thing. And early in your career is the perfect time to actually learn, increase your learning. And some learnings will come from failure. If you are lucky, maybe you will be successful. Throughout my career, I actually think a lot of success it's hard work, but there is luck involved. If anyone tells you, oh, I was just very hard working and there was no luck, probably they're lying. I can tell you I work extremely hard, but every moment I also think, okay, there is something in the universe aligning as well, right? That I did not control. That's sometimes works in my favor, sometimes works against me. But when it works in my favor, I need to leverage it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Working hard increases your luck surface area, but you still need some luck. It's great advice. And if people want to learn more about Ema, want to try the product or come work for the company, where should they go?
http://ema.co, ema.co. Yeah, we are hiring great people, amazing people, both in Silicon Valley, and also we have a center in Bangalore, India, and actually remotely at this point as well. We have folks all across US, and we're just opening up some roles in Canada as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Perfect.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Autopilot podcast. If you're using AI to create or disrupt a large industry, I would love to learn more about your story. Drop me a line on Twitter or go to our website, apv.vc. If you want to support the show, the best ways are to leave a review wherever you're listening and subscribe. The Autopilot podcast is part of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Moment of Zen, Turpentine VC, Age of Miracles, and more shows for experts by experts in tech.